800 milligrams. Yo, what's going on? It's someone that's no one, and welcome to today's report. Today's report was sent in by Ben. The drugs used diphenhydramine and nicotine at a dose of 800 milligrams. The route of administration was orally through ZQuil and Benadryl. Gender, male. Age, 19. Prior experience, Lyrica, Vicodin, DPH, opiates, Ativan, Ambien, alcohol, and nicotine, and the setting was in his house in Chicago. So this is an account of a regular user's experience where they decide to take a high dose and they end up seeing quite a bit. So it's pretty interesting. I'm sure you guys are going to like it. And without further ado, let's dive right into it. When I started taking DPH, it was in the form of ZQuil because I couldn't sleep. I was only 17 and I'm 19 now, so I've been taking this stuff at least 3 times a week in 50 milligram doses for around 2 years. In between now and then, I tried and was addicted to a lot of different drugs. Lyrica, Vicodin, Ativan, Ambien, and alcohol, just to name a few of the many things I found in various medicine cabinets and around the house. And at the time of my DPH trip, I was pretty much off of everything except cigs and Lyrica. When I was addicted to all of this stuff, I became very interested in pharmacology, so I did research on a lot of different drugs and the effects, and Benadryl was one of them. Because I took it so often and mixed it with the stuff I like to take, I wanted to know if it was dangerous. It was weird to me how I had been taking this stuff for a while at this point and never knew about the effects it can have on you at delirium doses, and they fascinated me. I took a box of Benadryl from my grandparents and I had my own bottle of ZQuil. I drank the whole bottle, which I figured out comes out to about 550 milligrams of DPH, and took 10 25 milligram pills from the box, and that comes out to about 800 milligrams. It was about 10 p.m. and I was playing something on my computer at the time. It was either GTA 4 or World of Warcraft. I can't remember. After about 30 to 45 minutes, I got the typical muscle relaxant feeling and felt really heavy arms and legs and got extreme dry mouth. An hour in, I found it really hard to focus, and opening my eyes to look at my monitor hurt, like looking at your phone on full brightness after just waking up. I was typing to my friend in Discord and he asked if I had been taking anything because it was a jumbled mess. I didn't want him to know I was on anything because he knew about my history of addiction and was worried about me. So I tried focusing really hard on typing, "No, LOL, just some Benadryl," which took 15 minutes, and decided to close Discord because I thought it was best not to type anymore as to not give myself away. My first order of business when I knew it kicked in was to turn on my YouTube playlist and go smoke a cigarette because I loved music and jammed out for a bit while I was on my phone sitting outside in the middle of the night in a terrible neighborhood in Chicago. This is where the experience gets blurry. I don't remember what I did on my phone, but the next day I found I just had sent a bunch of jumbled text to my online friends. Some of them were just random jumbles of letters, others were half sentences that didn't make sense, some were just memes or random pictures with no context. Back to my trip, I got the urge to urinate, so I went inside to go to the bathroom, ended up taking a shower for some reason, and came back through the open door to my living room, where my computer was, and I saw something like a baby crawling on my ottoman, and it freaked me out for a minute, and I was kind of scared to go back to my desk. This is where I feel that my trip differs from others. I realized it was a hallucination after a minute or two, and just walked through the door to my desk, and it wasn't there anymore. I sat at my desk listening to Faces by Mac Miller because I thought it was fitting for some reason. I looked at the cables on my desk, and they were moving by themselves, kind of like snakes slithering, and then I noticed a small figure about 2 or 3 inches tall on my desk. I can't exactly recall what it was doing or what it looked like, but another one appeared, and I just let them do their thing on my desk while I looked at 4chan. I want to say about 30 minutes go by, and I turn around and catch an old couple sitting there looking at me, and quickly turning around when I saw them. I turned back to my desk and back to them and caught them looking again. I got up, and some of my exercise equipment turned into snakes. I just stood there looking at the old people and the snakes. I look over to the other room, and there's the same baby crawling up and around the filing cabinet, and I thought, somebody better come get their kid before he hurts himself. And I headed to the bathroom and stood above the toilet trying to pee, and I felt like something was watching me. This is the only time I felt something sinister was present throughout the trip. I walked outside the bathroom and looked around. Behind a pillar, an extremely tall man in all black in a plague doctor outfit tried to hide, but wasn't doing a very good job, so his mask, hat, and dress were sticking out a bit. This is the part of the trip I felt scared and thought I was genuinely in danger. I knew it was a hallucination deep down, but it's like my brain completely ignored that and flooded with anxiety and bad thoughts. I ran to my living room and sat on the couch, and there were a bunch of people sitting in rows in front of me, looking away from me, including the old couple, like I was waiting at the DMV. I had a conversation with some good young-looking guy that went something like, "Hey, your bags are over there," and he pointed to a backpack on the ground, which wasn't even mine, and I didn't even own a backpack in general. I just said, "Thanks," and I don't remember anything else from that night, except I had a couple more conversations with those people, but I couldn't remember exactly what. The next day I woke up after sleeping for what my mom told me was 18 hours, and I felt like I was going through opiate withdrawal all over again, minus the restless leg syndrome. I did a dumb thing and drank half a bottle of ZzzQuil, attempting to get the experience from last night, but all I got was ants on the edge of stuff, dry mouth, muscle relaxant, and the music enhancement. I still take it 3 to 5 times a week in 250 milligram doses for muscle relaxation and music enhancement, and plan to do a gram trip when I stop taking it for a bit to let my tolerance die down completely and report back. Entheogenic amanitas. Yo, what's going on? It's someone that's no one, and welcome to today's report. Today's report is coming from Tengu, Japan, off Irwin. When this happened, 1998, the drugs used Amanita pantherina at a dose of 8 grams, age 37. The route of administration was through tea, and the prior experience includes Amanita muscaria. So this trip report is a little bit different because it isn't necessarily coming from a normal person, but it's rather a citation from the Entheogenic Review, which was the journal about research of plants and drugs that ran from 1992 to 2008. So this is pretty informational, and it is pretty interesting as we do get to see another Amanita mushroom and see what the effects are like and how they differ from Amanita muscaria. So I think you guys are going to like this one, and without further ado, let's dive right into it. Citation: Tengu, Japan, Entheogenic Amanitas. The Entheogen Review. Summer Solstice, 1998, 7/2/33. I have found through countless bioassays that both Amanita muscaria and A. pantherina are entheogenic. I've collected A. muscaria in New Mexico's Rockies and in Japan. The New Mexican variety from near Santa Fe was quite nauseating and caused me to use a box of tissues as I drooled profusely. The Japanese variety caused little drooling and was stronger, but also had a lot of nausea. I won't do either again. The star is the A. pantherina. It is stronger, cleaner, and causes little or no nausea, perhaps due to lower concentrations of mascarine, a toxin in A. muscaria with the above-mentioned side effects. These mushrooms cause one step into a world where the internal monologue is silenced. Vision appears as if one is scuba diving. The air appears thick, and size and distance is distorted. Usually after about an hour, one falls asleep. It is best to set an alarm for 1 hour and let it take you under. That dreamlike sleep is interesting, though the right and left lobes of your brain seem to continually buzz loudly, pulsating from right to left as your heart beats. The buzzing increases until you wish to lay down. Don't fight it, just set the alarm. Upon waking, The world has changed, like looking through a large aquarium. Mirrors are strange to gaze upon. I recommend no more than 2 dried grams initially. I once foolishly ate 8 grams of Japanese A. pantherina found under aspens in September, which I boiled into a tea. I drank the tea at 4 p.m. After 2 hours, the effects were frighteningly strong, so I took 2 capsules of milk thistle, Silybum marianum, to rid of the ibotenic acid from my liver. Next, the power of the drug surged, possibly due to the milk thistle. It may have sent all the stored toxins back into my blood rather than expelling them. I recommend caution if experimenting with milk thistle and A. pantherina. It turned into a nightmare as my brain throbbed right and left. Soon, I spun as one would with too much alcohol, but then it doubled, then tripled, then a millionfold. Then astronomically, I spun. The room I was in no longer appeared. I clutched the only thing I could feel, a speaker. I remember holding the speaker soaring round and round through space. Recalling past LSD trips, ayahuasca, and other combinations, nothing had come near this distance from reality. Time was gone. For many hours, it continued. I was convinced that I was in hell. I thought, shit, why hell? I am not a bad person. I was convinced that I had died. I remembered Pharmacotheon stated that A. pantherina weren't deadly. Oat, 1993. Though I feared the milk thistle may have rendered it so. I was terrified. My body was not with me, just the spirit among 1,000 streaks of lightning surging through some fantastically large black hole-like abyss. The spinning non-world continued for what seemed as long as my entire 37 years of life, until 3 a.m. when I regained more normal consciousness. I awoke to a ransacked house, food and books strewn about. Things were scribbled on paper. I remember none of that. A 12-hour-plus visit to hell. The next day, I ran out in the yard and grabbed plants, hugged trees, and smiled at everyone I saw, happy to be alive. So if you want to try amanitas, try A. pantherina in small doses. Tengu, Japan. There has been some success using Silybum marianum to treat amatoxin poisoning. Oat, 1993, citing Der Martirosian and Liberty, 1988, and Foster, 1991. However, this one seemed to relate to possible muscarinic reactions or overdoses of ibotenic acid / mucimol. And while atropine is used as an antidote to mucarin, it is contraindicated in cases where ibotenic acid / mucimol are involved. We have no idea if the S. marianum contributed in any way to the strength of A. pantherina's effects in this case. For more information on human bioassays of these mushrooms, we recommend reading Psychomycological Studies of Amanita from Ancient Sacrament to Modern Phobia, Oat, 1976. Alright, so Amanita pantherina is a relative to the well-known mushroom Amanita muscaria, well, the Mario mushroom, right? And for both, it's thought to have ibotenic acid and mucimol to be responsible for the psychoactive effects. And because of this, it's very easy for us to compare muscaria to pantherina, which in this case here reported from Tengu, it shows that pantherina may be an alternative for anyone who's venturing into amanitas. Regardless of this though, it's still regarded as a poison and it's actually difficult to say what an actual dose of these would be. That's why there was an advised caution recommended at 2 grams from Tengu. Each mushroom or bunch may have varying concentrations of the active compounds. So a lot of the effects here can be imagined as, well, getting poisoned and tripping, which I think in turn heightens the user's awareness of their well-being and often after come to appreciate life more so. And a trip I want to bring up is our first Amanita muscaria trip, First I Met God, Then I Was God by Synthesis. In his trip, he took 28 grams, which, yeah, a way higher dose, but I don't think the effects Synthesis experienced are too far off from what Tengu experienced. Synthesis recalls the creation of the universe and its death to becoming God and feeling trapped in hell. Both report not feeling they have a body either, and basically they just go through this very intense universal type of experience. But afterwards, both seemed to leave the users with clearer heads and with a more appreciative outlook on life. So with that, Pantherina may have some varying effects, but at the end of the day, you can tell they're pretty similar like their siblings. And as with the rest of the Amanita's, we're just gonna have to wait and see. So I hope you guys did enjoy this video, and if you guys want me to dive into the other Amanita mushrooms, request them below, and we'll dive into it. And if you want to see more of these or whatever, my whole head throbbed pleasantly. Yo, what's going on? It's someone that's no one, and welcome to today's report. Today's report is coming from Gil off Irwin. When this happened, 2007, the drugs used, nitrate, are poppers. The route of administration was inhalation, gender, male, weight, 65 kilograms. Prior experience includes cannabis, and the setting was at school, in class, and at lunch. So I believe someone specifically requested amyl nitrate, and well, that happens to be the main ingredient in poppers, and it does stand out in some way compared to most of the other inhalants we have done so far. And hey, it is another inhalant. We haven't done an inhalant in a minute now, so I'm sure you guys are going to like this one. And without further ado, let's dive right into it. The popper days. My first experience with poppers was in 2007. I was in year 9. Before then, the only real drug I had done was cannabis. My friend Verity, who was the one who had got me into drugs in the first place, showed me in school one day and said to me, "Look what I've got," as she pulled out a small brown glass bottle from her bag. "What the fuck is that?" I asked. "Poppers," she mouthed back to me. I had read about them on the internet before, but didn't really know much about them. I never thought the chance to try them would come. Anyway, we went down to an IT room for a geography lesson. I spoke to Verity on the way down. "What do poppers actually do?" I asked. I had read that they give you a head rush, but knew nothing else. "Wait and see," she said. We got to the IT room, and when everyone else was getting on with their work, Verity got out the bottle. She unscrewed the lid, looked around for the teacher, and took a sniff. She held her breath for a moment, then let out a quiet sigh and started laughing. She continued to laugh, and her whole face went bright red. It was like this for about a minute, and then she handed me the bottle. I did the same as her. I unscrewed the lid, looked around for the teacher, then looked at Verity. I was a bit scared, to be honest, because I had read somewhere that poppers are called poppers because they make your head feel like it's going to pop. Surely that would hurt. I decided there was only one way to find out. I covered one nostril, raised the bottle of clear, smelly liquid up to my nose, and breathed in deeply through my nose. Briefly, the inside of my nose burnt like fuck, but I would soon find out that this pain is definitely worth it. I held my breath for about 5 seconds, then let go. Slowly, I felt a warm feeling crawl up the back of my neck and into my head. My whole head throbbed pleasantly, and I suddenly felt very warm and comfortable. Then the head rush kicked in. I could feel the blood gushing through my head. It was the most amazing feeling. I ended up with Verity giving me the bottle of poppers. I spent many lunchtimes high, secretly sniffing the stuff with my other drug buddies, Stewie, Stevie, and Lenny. Eventually, we built up a tolerance to the drug and gave it up. I've done poppers a couple of times since then, but it will never be as good as the first time. So now we're finally getting around to these little buggers, right? Poppers. This is somewhat of a more well-known drug. Maybe not so much now, but in the past 30, 40 years prior, they have been somewhat popular, mostly having a reputation being used in club scenes and in homosexual acts. Basically, if you didn't pick it up from the story, Poppers are consisted of nitrate substances such as ammonite. They lie in a liquid in which you inhale the fumes off. You end up getting a high that lasts no longer than a few minutes, and it has some recreational value and provides muscle relaxation. It's a vasodilator as well and causes the blood pressure to drop. Now, for the most part, poppers through inhalation doesn't lead one to a dangerous state. The dangers mainly come when you actually come into contact with the liquid, so drinking this stuff is not advised, and there may be possible dangers with prolonged use as well. But otherwise, seeing that it's our first report of poppers, I'd say it does stand out in a much safer way compared to the other inhalants we've covered on this channel other than nitrous oxide. And I mean, just looking at it, we've had petroleum ether, paint thinner, propane, and glue. All of that stuff is nowhere near intended to be for any human consumption. Nitrous and ammonite outside of recreational use actually do have some medicinal purposes, which goes beyond the recreational value. But the high from poppers does seem to have similarities with the other inhalants, though not to an extreme degree as with some experiences. But I'd say it's pretty unique in its physical effects. So with that, we're going to end the video here. If you want to see more on poppers, let me know, or any other the worst evening. Yo, what's going on? It's someone that's no one, and welcome to today's report. Today's report is coming from Bent Razor off Irwin. When this happened, 2001, the drugs used lorazepam at a dose of 3 milligrams. The route of administration was orally through pills. Gender, male. Weight, 137 pounds. Prior experience, he's noted he's drank scotch in school before, and the setting, he was on a school trip for music, started in the hotel room, and ended up at a performance. So this is a lorazepam experience that turned out unfortunate for our buddy Bent Razor here, as he was hoping to get a good night's sleep here, but ended up having to go to a jazz performance because his teacher made him. And unfortunately, the lorazepam gets the better of him, and he ends up in a somewhat helpless state. So I'm pretty sure this is our second benzo that we're covering. I know you guys are going to like this one, and without further ado, let's dive right into it. It was the spring break of my senior year in high school. Our jazz band, in which I played the less than important auxiliary percussion parts, remember the corrugated fish in grade school music class, went on a trip. Recently, I experienced a stress-induced insomnia and resulting psychosis. After a visit to a local psychiatrist, I went to Kmart with my grandmother to get my prescription filled, lorazepam, 1 milligram dosage. I had taken 3 of these capsules with me in case I had trouble sleeping. The first night passed without incident. On the second evening, 3 friends and myself were hanging out in our hotel room watching The Simpsons. We were supposed to leave to watch another jazz performance. I'd had enough of jazz for one lifetime already, so one of my buddies said he'd stay behind with me. Good enough. After The Simpsons concluded, I felt an impending sense of boredom. I decided to cut the evening short by taking all 3 of the lorazepam tabs, a triple overdose, and dedicate my evening to nothing but a deeply medicated sleep. I asked my friend if it was cool if I just crashed for the evening. It was only 5:30 at the time. He had no objections, so I dropped the pills and waited patiently for my well-deserved escape from the day. Funny how plans can change. Right before I slipped into my placid escape, a knock came at the door. It was our band teacher. "Everybody downstairs, we're leaving in 10 minutes. My eyes widened. "Wait, can't we stay here?" I asked, unsuccessfully trying to hide the panic in my voice. He simply shook his head and disappeared into the hallway. Uh-oh. It doesn't take a genius to figure out that taking 3 times the recommended dose of a sedative and then venturing out into a public place against your will can have some unwelcoming effects. This, in combination with the fact that I was emotionally depressed to begin with, made for one deplorable evening. The most noticeable effects took place about a half hour later when we arrived at the festival. When trying to step off the bus, I nearly fell. My balance was so off that I couldn't walk without stumbling. I had once drank 7 ounces of scotch on an empty stomach in school and still been able to walk a straight line, so this was a very frustrated development. My vision was distorted. It looked like I was watching the world through an ancient home video, only getting every 3rd frame. I felt drunk and disoriented, a unique feeling for which I can provide no comparison. We arrived inside the concert hall. The upbeat music echoed from the stage, pounding in my ears and only adding to my confusion. When I felt I couldn't take any more, I got up from my seat to take a walk and collect my thoughts. This, too, did not go as planned, since I just ended up getting lost on the wrong floor. After walking circles and getting nowhere, I finally sat down on the steps. I felt so overwhelmed that I began to sob openly and uncontrollably. An onlooking Good Samaritan witnessed this pathetic act. She walked over and sat down right next to me. Not what I needed. "Are you okay?" she cooed. I made no response. Just a little side note, if you see a teenage male crying like an infant with a diaper rash, chances are he's not okay. "Is it about a girl?" I shook my head slowly. "Do you want to talk about it?" "No," was all I could muster. She finally got the hint and returned to her group of friends, who were staring hard at me by this time. How utterly humiliating. After several more lost minutes, as well as odd glances from security, I finally made it back to my seat. I spent the rest of the evening wallowing in suicidal thoughts and despair. All in all, one of the worst evenings I've ever had. Upon reading this, do not assume that lorazepam has no value as a recreational drug. I once took 4 milligrams in my house and had a great trip, with lasting euphoria and excellent visuals. As with any drugs, stay in a controlled environment, take your current frame of mind into account, and be careful. Alright, so Bent Razor here unfortunately ended up on 3 milligrams lorazepam in public. Not the best scenario you want to find yourself in, as that is considered a pretty strong dose, in which that left him getting hit pretty hard by the drug. As we can see, he experienced a lot of physical effects like sedation, motor loss control, some dizziness, and I imagine it must have been real frustrating trying to normally operate in such a difficult and confused state. A dose like that normally has you snug in a rug in your bed, but lorazepam is generally like most other benzos. There is the same risk potential for addiction, overdosing in combination with other depressants, and all your classical benzo effects. Thus, because so, we can compare this to a benzo we've covered on this channel before, alprazolam, the famous Xanax. Both of the drugs last relatively around the same time. They come on around the same time, though it probably is possible to piss out lorazepam faster based off its chemistry. And I want to bring up 2 reports though, both of which you can find in the description below are on screen. Panic Be Gone by Jitters and Xanax and Mental Illness by Evan. Both of these reports include 2 people who go through a lot of stress and anxiety naturally. Jitters, he was a student who eventually got a prescription for Xanax and it gradually eased him up, calmed him down for social situations. While Evan, he too was a student, feeling heavily pressured from his mom though, and was given a pill from his friend in which it helped relieve his mind and outlook at the time. While looking at Bent Razor's case, it was mainly used for sleep, which differs from Jitters, but I imagine that Bent Razor's socialization would have been normal if he hadn't taken such a large dose. But I do think there may be a relation between Evans and Bent Razor's behavior. 3 milligrams is a binge experience and probably shouldn't be done often. He did also note he did a 4 milligram experience as well, in which he may have been seeking some relief with some cozy sleep, but it may not be the best behavior later down the road, as Evans' behavior with Xanax eventually led him to taking up to 28 milligrams at one point, and resulting with him having a seizure and lasting effects. But with that, I'm going to end it there. Wow. Here we are. 10,000 subscribers. It's like a fucking dream, man. I can't put into words how thankful I am for everyone who decided to ride along on this channel's rise. But not only that, but the rise of substance awareness and the rise of the way of the psychonaut. I really appreciate every single one of you, and if time warranted it, I would send everyone a personal thank you message. But since that shit's ridiculous, how about I just make more videos for you guys? I really want to focus on being committed to uploading consistently, and I know the last year there was a 2 to 3 month period break I took, and that shouldn't happen again, nor will I let it happen again. I love making these videos. I love looking into substances the way we do. I love it from an entertainment value as well. I just fucking love this channel, and boy, let me tell you, when I say this is the start, this is only the fucking start. I'm hype as fuck for what we got coming up. But let's actually get into the special. I've been talking about this ever since we hit 5,000, which was our first time trying 1P LSD. This will be my first time trying diphenhydramine, or DPH, or Benadryl, whatever you want to call it. It happened literally the day after Evan and I first tried dextromethorphan. Now let me lay down some background for those of you who are unaware or just need a refresher. Evan is a homie of mine from high school. We met through track and field, where we would find a very similar interest, and that was substances. Once we were out of season and had free time is when we ventured into what I call Chapter 1, Beginnings of a Psychonaut. This is basically a portion of my life where I stepped into the world of drugs with my buddy Evan. We tried a variety of substances, where you can find a majority of the prior ones in the Chapter 1 playlist, and I'm hoping we can complete this playlist this year. But why were we interested in DPH? I mean, initially, it was and still is through psychonautics purposes, to see life through different lenses, experience what experience can be and what not. Now I'll admit that at the time our attitudes were a bit more juvenile, seeing that we didn't want to waste no time at all to try another substance, but we proceeded in a safe and cautious manner. Looking in on this particular day, I didn't see Evan until late afternoon. Note, I did wake up with somewhat of an afterglow from the previous day's DXM, so that may have ended up playing an effect later. But, as always, Evan scoops me and we go smoke a blunt. Now, Evan and I were both super intrigued by DXM, but more intrigued that it was possible to get high like that from something you can get at the grocery store. Because of this, of course, we were just researching as much as we can about anything really, and decided that we should try something else that day. At first, Benadryl wasn't our first choice. We noted it was an option, but saw that most people didn't end up enjoying their experiences. I remember Benzodrix or propylhexedrine was being considered, but we decided against it since it was already getting late and Evan specifically had to be up early for work. And I do think there were some other options, but I think we had to go out of our way or get it online. I noted to Evan that Benadryl would be sedating, so we wouldn't have trouble falling asleep, and we looked into it more. We knew we can just get that shit down the street, no problem, and eventually we just said fuck it. Let's go on another trip today and see what's up. So the plan was, let's grab this Benadryl real quick, start tripping, then Isabel told us that after she was off work, Cindy planned to come through and scoop us all, including Grace, and have a decent sesh that night. If you don't know, these were some girls a part of our friend group at the time. But that sounded fantastic to me. We both wanted to make sure we would be able to smoke during our trip, but in actuality, I don't really think it helped a ton, and we'll get into that a bit later. But we decided upon a dose of 300 milligrams. But with any dose we tried the first time, We didn't want it to be too strong or too weak, and I would say we hit a good spot at this dose that led us to see a lot of the effects. So we hit up the store, grab a 24 pack, which was a perfect split, head over to Evan's crib, and take them in his room. Evan was a bit more anxious with this one because we weren't necessarily expecting the best of effects, but we actually went in with some optimism. Once we downed the pills and we were waiting for the come up, I was getting some butterflies in my stomach, thinking, man, we're about to trip again, we're about to be in this whole new world to explore right now. So we hang out in Evan's room, and it's almost 6 when we took it, and it took about an hour to come on. The first thing I noticed was a slight change in perception. Things seemed a bit darker and less defined, and at the time, we always loved to look for changes in our eyes. So we shine flashlights in the mirror, and we see our pupils have grown much larger. That's how we knew we were in it. Now as I progressively come on, I start to get thoughts of worry and feelings like there's something there or there's something not right. At the same time, I try not to be a bitch, and I'd say being tough has helped me through quite a bit of experiences. Not always, but this night in particular was one where I did experience a lot of anxiety and did have paranoid thoughts, but never really let any of it out or broke down. And I wouldn't say that any of these effects really started to happen until we left Evan's place, which, when Cindy came by, it was around 8. Isabel ended up driving, Evan took the front passenger, while I ended up behind him next to Grace in the middle, and Cindy behind Isabel. Evan and I were acting a bit strange, like our voices were a bit jumpy, and our eyes were probably darting around a bit more than normal. So instead of us trying to hide it from them, we just told them we did more DXM, which I remember Isabel saying something like, y'all some crackheads, and they rip on us more later into the trip. But we go to pick up some more bud, and this is when I start getting anxious. The car ride wasn't like any car ride I had before. For whatever reason, I began to feel more and more vulnerable, and I was expecting some weird scary shit to start happening in the trip. I got worried too of just strangers, or that the cops were gonna pull up out of nowhere. And I know the girls were just talking about who knows what, but all of that just went past my head. I mainly was just looking out the window, while Evan seemed to be doing the same. We both answered questions briefly, and we were just in the experience at this point. My heart rate went up, and coupled with the anxiety I was going through, it was just very physically uncomfortable at the time. I think I had some slight muscle spasms too throughout the experience, and was just a bit jumpy. Also, something that sucked, that progressively got worse, was that my legs itched often. I'd gotten some mosquito bites a few days back, so the feeling was just intensified. I began to think that bugs were crawling on my legs though later, so it was very far from desirable, I'd say. Though with all that, I was relatively intact, able to comprehend what was going on, didn't experience any hallucinations yet, and could conversate appropriately enough. But anyways, we drive to the Plug's house. It wasn't in the most welcoming neighborhood, which didn't help my anxiety any bit. Then we park outside this dude's place, and it feels like an eternity for him to show up, and even when he does, I feel like the exchange just takes way longer than it should be. But everything's fine, of course, and we end up driving around. This night, I'm pretty sure a lot of driving did happen, which led to me being confused about where we were actually going, but they decided that we should go smoke by the river. Basically, my town has this river running through it, and there's like 5 bridges or whatever for people to get across. Boats come across all the time, and below it, you can stand by the railing or just sit in some seats there. So we drive there, and I'm still worrying about all this bullshit, but at the same time just looking, expecting some hallucination or something to pop up out of nowhere. And I'm pretty sure we had some music playing at this point. Now these girls love to play some hood trap, like Ludfoe, Young Poppy, Chief Keef if you know them, which is a harder kind of vibe, and I have to say, it really didn't mesh well with the trip. If you don't know, some of their songs can have like a heavy feeling to it, somewhat aggressive and rough, and I'm pretty sure it contributed to the way I was feeling. But overall, the music wasn't any better or that worse, but just somewhat odd and there. We eventually get to the river right by this park, and I was somewhat relieved because I was able to get up and move around, but once I was out, it really didn't make much of a difference. I get a chance to get a word with Evan and say, man, this shit's crazy, something just feels wrong, which he agrees to. He noted he felt a bit confused and like there was something bad that was gonna happen. Grace rolls up, I think, which takes a minute, but feels like a long ass time for me, and I'm just looking all over the place. Things were dimmer, but still no pronounced hallucinations or bugs or anything. But this would change once we smoked this first blunt. We decided to find some seats by the river once it was rolled up. Evan and I were already sitting down when the girls came up, and as soon as they came up, there's this cockroach that just crawls across the ground in front of me and Evan. Evan and I stare at it in disbelief, somewhat abhorred by it, like, oh shit, what else is about to happen? But Grace and Cindy just scream, saying gross or whatever, and I'm pretty sure Isabel just comes and stomps it. It was real. Though it was real, I feel like it set a vibe for the rest of the trip that was to come. Some real hallucinations. Once we smoke this blunt, my body relaxes a bit, but my mind stays right where it was, taking this in and looking for the next thing. And not much happens until we decide to leave. Isabel brought up her dad needed a ride from the bar, so we got ready to go. Once I turned around and faced the road, far away down the road, I spotted a dark figure walking our way. I couldn't see a face as I'm pretty sure they were in a trench coat and hat, but I couldn't see any skin at all. The person had a really creepy vibe. I pointed it out to Evan and he saw the same thing, almost like it wasn't a real person. He says, "Let's just go." We hop back in the car, which was faced the opposite way of where the person was walking. Isabel pulls out and we start driving the way where the guy should have been, but we drive by and there's no one there. I want to point it out to Evan, but not out loud. The thing is, I didn't want to give any signs of panic or anything that would suggest we weren't having a good time or something was wrong. The thing was, we didn't need that kind of attention from the girls or a lecture when we were experienced and all that. So we just keep quiet and they blast the music. And it's like the way it was before. I'm in the back seat looking out, somewhat worried about police or some other threat, but mainly wondering at this point if there's going to be any more hallucinations that are just going to pop up and scare the crap out of me. I guess the most unsettling thing about it is you don't know when it might happen or in what way. But we drive through town, which again feels like forever, but takes like 7 minutes, and we get to Isabel's dad. This was my first time ever really meeting her dad, which he hadn't really been around too much in her life, because I think he was in jail for meth possession or something like that, but they were trying to work out shit, you know. So Evan ends up in the back seat as we squeeze 4 in the back. I remember hearing this guy saying too that he was about to get some ass once we dropped him off at this chick's place. Like, just ridiculous. But then we drove around some more and nothing really else happened. Not until we smoked again. This time we headed back to Evan's place and just lit up in the whip and hotboxed. As we were smoking, I was looking around, still expecting some bad shit to pop up, and I start getting glimpses of something in the car. I didn't know what it was at first, but it was bothering me for sure. I kept trying to spot what it was, and finally, I see a wasp just glide by in the car. At first, I just close and rub my eyes, seeing if I'm just tripping, and I try to see if it's still there. It takes a minute, but I see it again. A huge black wasp. I was just thinking, man, I am not fucking with this shit right now, and just speak up and say, somewhat panicked, "Yo, what's that?" "What is what?" both Cindy and Grace asked, since they shared my view somewhat. And I'm like, "That." I pointed in the space of the car. "Is there a bug flying around?" And they're like, "Where?" Then they turn on their flashlights, and there's nothing there, and I quickly make out what I was actually seeing. The smoke floating by. "Nah, there's nothing there. You're just tripping, man," Cindy said. "If there's a bug in here, he would have been smoked out already." And I just couldn't believe it. Evan didn't experience any bugs though. Once they turned off their flashlights, the wasp was starting to come back a bit too, so I just ended up turning my attention back outside. Then following this, since they saw I was tweaking a little, they were saying things like, "You guys shouldn't be doing that cough syrup shit," even though it was allergy medicine this time, and things like, "I knew people who got addicted to it," and "You can overdose," and shit like, "You're a real crackhead if you need to take over-the-counter medicine to get high." But I could barely articulate the reason as we wanted to try DPH and how we weren't in any danger, but I can admit that we should have waited before tripping again. And I have to note that the dry mouth was pretty shit, but I did have water on me, so I was faring okay throughout. But we hang out for a while more until like 11. Evan decides to cut it off here, which I don't blame him. This far in, I was beginning to feel a little more drained from the heavy sedation and somewhat tired of having to worry about getting scared, on top of which he had to be up at 6 in the morning for work. So, the girls ended up dropping me off, and I was pretty much planning to knock out right away, but I was starving. I remember having some chicken sandwiches and some other shit. But let me tell you, I fucking smashed this food, and it tasted fucking amazing. I can't deny this, it did increase my appetite quite a bit, and I thought food just had a much richer quality to it. But though the food had a better quality, everything else was still kinda garbage. I remember trying to watch YouTube, but I just kept getting distracted, thinking that there was something on the wall. Then I would look at the carpet and start thinking that there were little gnats or something crawling out of it. I did keep my light on though, figuring it would be worse with it off, and I pretty much just smash and then decide, fuck this shit, I'm going to sleep. And I shit you not, as soon as I lay down, I'm out like a light. The following day, I'm pretty sure I ended up with like 10 hours of sleep. But once I'm up, I hit up Evan to see how the rest of his trip went. He told me that he quote unquote woke up with withdrawals. What happened was though, when he woke up, he ended up puking and feeling like shit, having to call in sick. And I can't say I know why exactly this happened. It was probably due to the after effects, but it may have been due to his water intake or food intake, or just not getting enough sleep. But the day afterwards, I felt like garbage pretty much. I wasn't motivated to do anything, I felt super tired, and things were just duller in general. So overall, it wasn't the most enjoyable experience ever. There weren't really very many appealing aspects about it, especially physically. Physically, I was very uncomfortable, and just the anxiety about it wasn't the best either. But I do know once you get into higher doses, that anxiety somewhat does diminish completely, I hear. But beyond that, I'm still happy to have experienced it. It was a unique experience. Not as unique as the tour maybe, but we'll get into that someday. Maybe at 25K. The thing is, yeah, what are we gonna do at 25K? I don't know yet. I mean, there's a lot of substances we still gotta go through, but oh yeah, 25K is the next goal, right? It might be 20. I might set it at 20K, but yeah, maybe the tour, maybe something like LSA. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what's up. We'll see what happens, how we grow, and how fast we come out with the rest of the story. So, if you guys did enjoy this video, subscribe if you haven't already. Like the video. Comment something below.